Hello, I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to be talking about how to write about change management frameworks. Now, this is the catalyst for the webinar, but if we step back and look from 10,000 feet, we'll find that we are writing a compare and contrast paper. And so, as with so many things, once you understand the fundamentals of what you're being asked to do, you can apply that to a new subject matter area. More on that in a little bit. So this is one of our week 0 webinars where we're working with students who often are encountering the Writing Center for the first time. So let me tell you a little bit about what we do. The Online Writing Center is available for students in just about every online program at ACU Dallas, and we will work with you at any stage of your writing. You can walk into our virtual doors when you have just started to read the assignment instructions and are wondering how to interpret them, how to implement them in practice. You can come in when you have a paragraph, a thesis statement, a full-on draft, or even are revising something after it's been submitted and gotten feedback from the instructor, or looking at how to interpret the instructive feedback to make your paper stronger for the next time around. We work with students through webinars such as this. We answer questions via email. We have two main types of appointments. Asynchronous appointments, where you upload your paper. We send you feedback via email within 24 hours of your appointment time, as well as real-time appointments that can be done by phone or Zoom. Now, these are things where we do recommend that you sign up in advance. There's a limited number of drop-in hours where you just show up, but that's subject to demand. So if 3 people show up in the drop-in hours, that you will get less time for a 1-hour slot than if you had signed up for a whole 1-hour slot for yourself in advance. We also have many different resources that are on the Online Writing Center website. Explorations of different topics, complete copies of our webinar collection as videos you can watch, and whatever type of appointment you're doing, you'll first make a appointment through the WC Online scheduling system starting by going to my.acu.edu and under Links Resources, selecting the Online Writing Center, navigating the links there to sign up for your time. By the time your appointment slot rolls around, there's a link that you'll see to upload your paper draft to Canvas, and then we'll send you feedback within 24 hours generally. If it's, say, Easter weekend, might be a little bit longer, but we'll still get it to you in time for the submission deadline. There's no problem with uploading a copy of your draft in advance. Time permitting, we go through and look for those and can respond to those sooner rather than later. But if it happens that you have an updated version that you want to upload, just send us a note, whether via email or by editing the appointment form that you filled out earlier. So not a problem there, and if you have any trouble submitting, just send it to us via email, and we can work on it from there. Whatever program you're in, go ahead and scroll down on our Writing Webinars page and look for this tabbed guide, and you can select the guide and see all of the courses that have tie-ins here. So this webinar here is the first tie-in with the APCO program, so you'll see that added to this catalog later. Some things that you'll hear me referring to or might want to check out later: we have an APA course paper template that does a lot of the formatting for you, helps you make things look the way that they need to do and get full credit on that, a YouTube channel for accessing our videos on the go, and the blog that I mentioned earlier. With that, let's look at our learning objectives for today. First off, we're going to dive into APCO 421's Week 1 Assignment 1 Framework Differences and talk about how to interpret the instructions. We'll talk about how to find related literature as tasked for in the instructions, talk about comparison and contrast wording, and how all these things will come together when outlining and drafting your paper. Let's dive into this assignment. So this is coming from the course Executing Organizational Change, the Week 1 Assignment 1 about framework differences. And this is one of those things where you delve into talking about how things are different, how they're similar, how the practicalities of if you're using one thing versus another. What are the advantages of one approach? What may be more appealing to you personally or professionally? And with that, let's take a look at the actual instructions, which we've divided into different sections here. So there's a preamble where they tell you about the purpose of this assignment, which is to apply the pragmatic aspects of 3 major change approaches to the beginning of an execution plan for change. Okay, so there are 3 major change approaches studied in this week's reading, and if you're creating a plan, how will you use them? Will you select one approach? Will you select bits of different ones for different portions? And this is going to be applied in writing at 2 to 3 pages, which double-spaced, 1-inch margins, 12-point font is called for in APA format. It's going to be around 500 to 750 words. Write a 2 to 3 page paper that highlights what you see as the greatest differences between the change management frameworks of Kurt Lewin, Karl Weick, and Bart Dackes. I'm not sure if that's Polish or Czech, so pronounced a different way depending on which one it is or which one it is most recently. Using 4 to 6 resources beyond your texts and assigned readings for this week, you're asked to provide a short paragraph describing the focus of each framework, followed by your analysis of the differences. So we've got summarizing each framework, and then contrast them with your analysis of the differences. And we have a note here: remember, in your writing, it is better to paraphrase rather than quote, and synthesize sources to describe the frameworks, and also use the sources along with your own opinion to highlight the differences. And the instructions conclude with this note saying that if you're looking for more sources, you can look in the ACU Distance Learning portal, you can look in Google search. They're not limiting where you go to search, but to make sure that sources are credible. In this case, the generally accepted definition for that will be peer-reviewed sources coming from scholarly journal articles. So we'll talk about that when we get to that stage. If you look at the rubric, we see, among other things, there's this reminder that your paper should be 2 to 3 double-spaced pages of body text, so not counting the references, not counting the cover page, the title page. So 2 to 3 pages of body text for your essay. And there is also a reminder here in each of these lines of the rubric that there's a difference between fully addressing and partly addressing the prompt. So you don't want to just cover 2 of the frameworks discussed. All 3 is needed for full credit. All right, so let's talk about that literature search process. And 2 places that I'd recommend to start. First, the ACU Distance Education portal, which, besides being recommended in the instructions, will help you find things that you have access to read the full text and read without having to submit a library search or something like that. Rather than going to the main Google search engine, if you're going to be using Google, I'm going to recommend using Google Scholar, which is designed for searching scholarly literature, which includes peer-reviewed articles, but also things like books, which you might have access to in the ACU library or be able to preview through Google Books and other things like that. So some suggestions. When you're searching, suggest for peer-reviewed literature that's recent, generally understood as the last 5 years. You know, for this, there will be older things, but as a general rule, more recent is a good idea because conditions change. If we were writing before, say, the recession of 2008 to 2010, and there were a lot of projections about growth that changed when the economy cratered and money started to get more expensive to borrow and things like that. So recent literature helps make sure that it's relevant to current conditions, and think about what you can do to make your search more specific. What are the differences or foci that interest you? Now, I'm going to suggest that the approach, if there's something philosophically, for example, as a manager, I think yelling at people is terrible. I did actually once read an article that recommended yelling at people to keep them focused, and I thought, I don't think that will work for my cultural context. That's an approach that definitely does not work for me personally. So if there's something like that that is important to you, you can include that in your search. Now, if you're exploring literature about a particular author, then you probably want to have their name be in there as one of the search terms. Context, for example, are you interested in things in a particular country because of the before mentioned cultural things. It might even be looking for a region or a state as a context there because there's some regulatory or cultural thing there. Full text, that's a good one to make sure that you don't have to send a wave to the library for interlibrary loan to read something. For this assignment, there will be plenty of choices that you can access immediately in full text, and with the tight turnaround time, that is a helpful thing for the intensive 7-week semester format. Use of technology, perhaps. Perhaps you are trying to implement change and there's a software program you're using or a model that you want to include in search terms to see what literature there is on that specific thing. As an example of how that might look in practice, you can take the distance education portal and search for change management in quotation marks so that it's looking for that combined term. And then in the case of this, the name of one of the authors, Lewin, and then benefits. You'll see on the left-hand side that I've selected a few things that I want to search the full text of the articles, not just the title and keywords. Want to search only articles that I have full text access to, scholarly or peer-reviewed journals published in the last 5 years, defined here as since 2017, and that gives me 1,233 results, which is more than I could possibly review for that, so I'm not worried that I'm being overly restrictive. I'm getting plenty of results for these things. So I could even be more restrictive. And if you're looking at the slide deck and you want to see this exact search string that you used to bring up these results, click on search string there and that should bring it up. Alright, before we move forward, let's just review some of the word choices that help indicate that you're comparing or contrasting. So comparing things like also, as well as, both, comparatively, in the same way, in addition, just as, most importantly. So these are things that help indicate to the reader clearly that you are comparing, which is important because you are asked to compare in this assignment, and part of your grade is demonstrating that you've compared things. Contrasting, here's some other words. I'm going to suggest not using on the other hand, because that could be viewed as being anthropomorphization, because the concepts do not literally have hands. You're not literally holding things up. But as you can see, there are plenty of other choices here that will indicate that you are contrasting. So let's talk about progressing to the outlining and drafting stage, which is how you read the instructions and use that to start planning your paper. Planning your paper in a fashion that the resulting paper will help your reader, the grader, look through the rubric and go, check, they did that, check, they did that, yep, they did that fully, and help you get full credit. So let's start by looking at key sources. And if we look at the module's reading page, we find that we have required readings, a course textbook, and 2 articles in Harvard Business Review, and a 3rd suggested. Now, the articles in Harvard Business Review, the reference entries, are pretty much a copy and paste. I would include a URL at the end because you are accessing the online versions, unless you happen to have a big stack of Harvard Business Reviews in your local library or that you already subscribe to. But as far as citing them, so in APA 7th edition, which is the version that we're using here, if you have a source of 3 or more authors, you immediately go to abbreviating to first author et al. Note that there's no comma before et al. There's not a period after the AL period. I'm sorry, there's not a comma after the AL period. It's just the publication year for when you're citing it in the body of the sentence, like Beer et al. Period, parentheses, 1990, close parentheses, said blah. But if it's a full-on parenthetical citation, which just, oh, that's where this information came from, then you would have the et al. Period, comma, and then the publication year. So mixing up the formatting for that and accidentally including a comma in the first instance is a common mistake, as well as spelling out all the author names. And that's something that changed from APA 6th edition. So if you learned APA a long while ago, then just be aware that this abbreviation, 3+ authors all the time, is a rule change. And if you have just 2 authors, you would use and between their names if it's outside the parentheses, and an ampersand if it's inside the parentheses. For the course textbook, A slight change in formatting from the information given in the syllabus. In APA style, you would format that title in sentence case, meaning the same way you'd format it for a sentence, including capitalizing, this being APA style, the first letter of a subtitle, so the E in energize. And we include the publisher name, Routledge, but we do not include the ISBN number. The ISBN number is handy to know for ordering that exact copy of the book, but it's not included in APA style, in part because nowadays say the Kindle version of the book and the print copy will be much the same for this given publication year, and so even though they have different ISBNs, you'll be getting the same content. So just a little change where they've updated that. Now, this does ask that you be synthesizing information, that you be comparing and contrasting. And so we've included links to a couple of resources that will help you understand that if this is something that you're new with, or you are wanting a little bit more of reinforcement or examples. So one model for incorporating synthesis in paragraph writing, that by yours truly, a link here, a new tiers plan for paragraph writing. And we also have a webinar on analysis and synthesis and how to add that to your writing, and a dedicated one about implementing synthesis in an assignment. So, in brief, the no tiers plan, if you are using this to add synthesis and show your understanding of material, we start with the topic sentence that lays out what you're writing about in the paragraph. Follow that with evidence or argumentation and analysis. Now, you can have more than one sentence of evidence or argumentation, especially if you're, in this case, comparing or contrasting different frameworks. So tell us one sentence about this author's framework, one sentence about the others, and then analyze, okay, how are they different or in common? That's the compare and contrast wording coming in. And then repeat as necessary. If you're doing a lot of comparing and contrasting, you may not need to repeat in this paragraph before you can synthesize and tell, okay, what's the importance of this? Are these differences things that make these frameworks incompatible, or can you use them together in this context to better understand or attack a problem? And then when we're done with that, you have a concluding or transitioning sentence to move on to the next phase of your argument. I'm going to recommend, if you don't have it already, that you download a copy of our APA course paper template, and then you'll see me sharing my screen for that. So I have here a blank copy of our APA course paper template, and you'll want to start by filling in your name, the title of paper, things like that. In APA style, names of papers don't have to be original or poetic, but they should be informative and reasonably concise. So if I just call this, say, Change Management Frameworks, no problem with that. Just make sure that the title is the same on the title page and when you start the body of your paper. Now I'm going to just briefly delete this placeholder text here. That's to show you how some formatting works. And I'm also going to delete these placeholder references. Alright, now if we just go ahead and start by copy and pasting the assignment instructions, this gives us a starting framework for things that we need to do. So looking at this, we know that we need to talk about these frameworks and to talk about their differences. So right off the bat, I can say, okay, we're going to need to discuss these three frameworks in order. You can actually change the order, but we want to make sure you get all three. And you can even go ahead and start saying, okay, well, how am I going to contrast that? Key similarities, key differences, compatibilities, perhaps. And use these as a list of things that you might discuss in your paragraphs here. Now, looking at this, we see it says, okay, using 4 to 6 resources beyond your text. Now that's saying not saying you can't use the text, but you should be using some additional ones here. So let's start by looking at how we might be adding things. And if we go back to look at the list of sources, okay, if we're going to be citing these anyway, well, we might as well go ahead and add that to our references list. Just make sure you actually do reference it. So that's one source, the main course textbook. We also have these ones here, so let's look at those. Now, if you are just copy and pasting directly from the course website, that's fine. It's a great time saver, but it does mean that you'll need to do some cleanup. So you can see here the font isn't quite the same. So if I click on this little icon here, I can select Match Destination Formatting, and now the font is the same. It's Times New Roman 12. Now I want to get rid of those bullets. That's fine. That takes me just a moment. And I'll want to rearrange so that this is alphabetical. Get rid of that came along for the ride. So take this, move it down here, and just make sure that you do some other cleanup. So start out by taking away this links to an external site text. We don't need that. And same thing for the third one. General rule of thumb when you're doing formatting for something like the references, it's always easier if you focus on just one task at a time. So see this comma here between the journal title and the volume number? That should not be italicized. And if you're looking just for that, it's very easy and fast to see, oh, I need to fix that in those three and fix it. Same thing, this should technically be an N dash, which you can see is slightly larger. And so I can just quickly replace that hyphen with the larger N dash, and then it's done. And I know it's done for all of these journal articles. Now for the link. So this is a hot link, where if I press Command K or Control K if you're on a PC, I can grab this link here, and then remove link, and just paste it at the end. And if you see something like that, whoops, accidentally left some italics in, accidentally left a parentheses, that's fine, take it out. And here, I'm going to grab this. And here we have those 4 references. So provided that we actually cite that, because there's an APA rule that if you're going to be listing a source in the references list, you should be citing it in the body of the document. We have that already in here. But let's go looking for some search results here, because we've got some other things. We need 4 to 6 different sources here. So let's say we're looking for change management frameworks by Lewin. So let's look at the different places we could go searching in turn. So one is we could go to the distance education portal. And if we just started searching for change management frameworks of Kurt Lewin, let's see what we end up for results. And as you're searching, you'll get this result, and we see just for that search like that, we have more than 7,000 results. That's a lot. That's more than I want to go for, and I think we can get more specific. And at the same time, though, if we look here, there might be something that you find useful here, because we have one of these subject things being, oh, hey, one of those authors. So if I click into this result, if I open up this search result, I can use that to do another search through here. See, change management is one of the subject terms, and there's people, Lewin. Okay, so if I use this, I'll get literature that relates to Kurt Lewin in some way, shape, or form. So if I click on that, we will get a search result focused on Kurt Lewin. And you see that that's a smaller number of searches. Okay. And we can even make this more advanced search. Okay, by clicking on advanced search. And then adding in here as, oh, I want to have change management as that. as being a specific term that I'm searching for. Now I can pick something here from that list, but now we're down to 103. I also want to make it full text, so only things that I can access right now. And it's starting to narrow things down, 46, okay. And scholarly peer-reviewed journal articles. And now, keeping in mind this is a week 1 assignment, so we need to do everything within a week. This is starting to really get this down into a realm of things where I can say, yes, that is something that I can sift through these and find some things here. So, for example, I might take this one and say, all right, this is from actually 5 years ago. I can read it right now. I'm interested in industrial psychology. Let me check this out. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this search result here. And this will bring me not to the article itself yet, but to its kind of overview, the summary of it, where I can look at how it's classified, keywords that might align with my interest, read the abstract to see if I'm interested in going further. And this is looking backwards at Lewin's framework, talking about its application to current issues. That sounds like exactly the kind of source I want for the paper that I'm writing. So, all right. So there are some helpful things here. One is that I can actually access the full text right away as a PDF or web page. I can also use this Cite button here. Let me zoom in a little bit. This Cite button here on the right-hand side. So this will pop open a quick reference for copy and pasting in a different citation system. Now, in this case, it's not perfect, but it does much of the work for me. And we'll talk about this in a little bit after we've copied and pasted this here. So this is going to go alphabetically between the Beer and Cotter and Schlesinger papers. Oh! And we paste and it's not quite right, so we select Match Destination Formatting. Didn't do it. Let's go for Keep Text Only. Alright, so looking at this, in APA style, in the references list, the title of an article will be formatted in sentence case. And a really quick way to change that, just go to this tool here and select sentence case, and you see that that's gone lowercase. Same thing here. For all this text, we want this to be lowercase, the Lewin, because it's proper noun, that stays capitalized, and this because it's the first letter of the subtitle stays capitalized. But the rest we can just switch to lowercase. And see how fast that is. It's much faster than my typing it in by myself. I'm going to go ahead and italicize the journal title, italicize the journal volume number, make that a hot link by hitting space after it. And while I'm down here, because I'm looking, I notice, oh, I actually left out a comma before that ampersand. Even though there's just 2 authors here, you need a comma before that ampersand in the references list. Alright, so we have a reference here. We'll be citing this as Endrahat et al. And as I'm just starting to plan things out, you'll see, okay, let me give myself a note that I should be citing that Endrahat et al. 2017. So as I do the reading, as I find these articles, I can make notes for myself. Oh, this is where this is going to be used, because it is looking retrospectively at Lewin's work. And you can go ahead and do that for Vike as well. So that is using the distance education portal. And we'll just go ahead and we'll open up the PDF here so that you can see that. Now, the other place that I'm recommending searching, and which one works better for you, is kind of a question of what you like. There's a lot more information at your fingertips here in the catalog. Some people find that overwhelming. Now, I'll point out here one of the advantages of using this, besides being able to just download this PDF directly and everything, this tells us here that this is part of a larger journal on change management that has, several articles about Lewin. So there's actually additional reading here that you might use if you need more than one source. Again, noting that you're required for this assignment to have 4 to 6 sources. And it even gives you this DOI here, which is even better to have than the APCO link here. Because while this is usable for someone at ACU, this requires that you log into ACU. And so we can have that DOI. I can even tell you, oh, there's a newer DOI format that we can upgrade this to. It looks clean. This is usable by anyone, and then they can use it to find where that article lives. So is that required for this assignment? No, but it's a good habit to get into because it'll come up in other things down the line. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at Google Scholar. So here, let's go to scholar.google.com, and we see, if you start typing in, Google Scholar will actually give you some suggestions on the fly. You see, okay, Lewin's change management. All right, let's take a look at that. And we have some options here to narrow down our searches. But one of the things that people often find very helpful about Google Scholar is the ease with which they can see related literature. And you see this cited by here. So this will tell you what articles Google Scholar knows about that are citing the specific one. So if you have an article that you're interested in seeing, okay, has someone written more about this? Have they followed up? For example, if you're working in a medical setting, like, oh, yes, more of that, then starting with this cited by is a pretty good way to start to see what other people who thought that was important were also looking at. So you can see here, there's a case review where someone was applying it. This is more of an overview thing of this process. Change management in healthcare. This is a book here. So you can look through and see things like this, and perhaps you are yourself looking at a government approach. Say, okay, so this article here links to a PDF. Let me go ahead and open that up and take a look and see, all right, does this relate to the work that I'm doing? And you want to look at the abstract here to see, and okay, talking about citizen relationship management. Okay, that's a sort of change management. Let's see where Lewin comes in. Okay, so they said, talking about many things being grounded in Lewin's model, and we can just do a word search and see, okay, how much is this actually discussed? Does this meet your needs? And here we find that this one happens to have a summary of these different change models being discussed. So if that happens to be something you look and say, yes, this is the kind of thing I want to be using for my paper, then great. You want to go ahead and add the reference to your references section and cite it in your outline and save a copy for later. So I think we should be wrapping up now because this is one of our introductory webinars to the topic. And if you want to have more detailed feedback, more detailed instruction on adding synthesis, you can use one of those webinars that we linked out to. But if you have any questions that you'd like to ask us, whether it's about citing a source, finding things, or just how to navigate our services, just send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu, or you can go to my.acu.edu and select Online Writing Center from the links of resources and sign up for an appointment. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of week 0.